She wasn't supposed to be on the ship. I found her hiding behind a coolant tank in the engine room, crouched low with her arms wrapped tight around her knees. At first, I thought she was just some kind of machine part. Her skin had a faint iridescence, catching the flickering light of the diagnostic panels. But then she moved. Her eyes opened, wide and pitch-black like the void outside, and she stared at me like I'd already pulled the trigger. I raised my hand slowly. "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't speak. Just watched me like a cornered animal, breathing fast. Her body was thin, too thin, and I could tell she hadn't eaten in a while. The scarf around her neck looked like it had once been a fine material, now torn and stained. There were subtle ridges on her cheeks, the kind I'd seen in biology texts but never up close. Definitely not human. Maybe Alaray, or something rarer. One of those fringe species the Union never bothered naming. "I'm the engineer," I said, crouching down. "This is the Sparrow's call. We're on a trade route between Hestel Station and the Ithis Belt. You don't need to be afraid." She swallowed hard. Her voice was like cracked crystal. "Please don't turn me in. I can work. I clean. Fix things." I didn't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the raw desperation in her voice. Maybe it was just the silence between her words, like she'd given up hope long before I'd opened that hatch. I nodded once. "Then you're part of the crew." Her shoulders sagged with relief. And just like that, a runaway alien girl became my quiet, invisible shadow. Ithis Prime was a floating contradiction, gleaming towers scraping the clouds, built on the bones of 1,000 broken deals. Corporate banners flapped across the skyports, each brighter and hollower than the last. Every breath tasted like metal and ozone, every face masked with synthetic confidence. I hated docking here, but we needed supplies, fuel cells, coolant, and a new stabilizer coil. Serana stayed aboard, tucked away in the maintenance bay. Her presence on a planet like this would have triggered every scanner within minutes. Her kind weren't welcome in places that traded in appearances and profit margins. I left her with a protein pack and the promise I wouldn't be long. When I came back, I handed her the scarf. Pale green, soft, woven from some local fabric that shimmered just a little too perfectly under the lights. I hadn't planned on buying it. It just looked like her. She held it in her hands like it might break. "It's beautiful." "So are you," I said without thinking, too tired to filter my honesty. She stiffened, eyes darting down, then away. A long pause settled between us before she whispered, "I'm not beautiful like human women." Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten. It wasn't self-pity. It was conviction, like she'd heard it too many times to question anymore. As if being different was something she had to apologize for every day of her life. I sat beside her on the grated floor, letting the hum of the reactor fill the space between us. "You don't see yourself the way I do," I murmured. "You'd leave mirrors speechless." She didn't respond, but that night, I saw her wearing the scarf. Carefully, gently, like it was the first gift she'd ever received. The Union dreadnought dropped out of warp like a silent god, eclipsing the stars with its shadow. Its presence alone made my skin crawl, massive, clinical, and far too interested in a nobody trader like me. Standard inspection, they claimed. Routine. But I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't routine. They came aboard in full armor, 2 officers and a scanning drone that buzzed like a hungry insect. I greeted them with the usual fake smile and offered up the ship's logs, hoping they'd skim and go. But the moment the drone swept past engineering, it beeped. Once. Then again. They followed the sound. "Engine room shows evidence of non-human biotrace." "Not on registry," the taller officer said, turning his visor toward me. I kept my tone even. "I've got an AI cleaning system. Might have picked up a leftover trail from a port worker." He stared for too long. "This isn't dockyard residue. You're harboring an undocumented being." The words hit harder than they should have. Undocumented was just a polite way of saying she didn't count. That she wasn't considered real. "She's helped with repairs," I said flatly. "Kept this ship from frying its primary core last cycle. That counts for something. That doesn't change her classification." I knew what would happen if they found her. She'd disappear. One of 1,000 cases lost in Union bureaucracy, or worse, sold off to some private collector for study. So I lied. I wiped the logs. She doesn't exist. You never saw her. Silence stretched. Finally, the officer stepped back. If she's caught planetside, she's not our problem. They left. But after that, Serana avoided even the smallest windows. And the stars she once watched like old friends became reminders of what would happen if we were ever truly seen. NYX-47 wasn't even on most star maps. A dustball moon with shattered temples and buried memories, orbiting a gas giant that hissed with constant storms. Perfect for hiding. The locals didn't ask questions, they barely spoke. You paid your docking fees in fuel, not credits, and they left you alone. We took a small room near the edge of the ruins. Crumbling stone, cracked floors, and a view of alien stars through a ceiling that had long since collapsed. It wasn't much, but Serana smiled when she stepped outside without fear. The first time she felt air on her face that didn't smell like ship grease or ion filters. She spent her days in the ancient library, what was left of it anyway. The archives were half ash, half crystal, holding echoes of a civilization that had vanished long before humanity had fire. She would sit cross-legged on the floor for hours, running her fingers over the etched glyphs, humming softly under her breath. One evening, she returned with a carved stone. Smooth, cool, and heavy, shaped into spirals that wrapped endlessly around each other. They believed in duality, she said, handing it to me. Shadow and flame. Silence and song. That contrast was strength. I turned the stone over in my hands. It felt warm where she had held it. Like you and me? I asked. She nodded, just barely. The fading light cast silver across her skin. Her eyes reflected it like polished glass, full of something fragile and bright. I never thought I'd find someone who didn't flinch when they saw me, she whispered. I reached out and touched her hand. Just for a second. I don't flinch, I said. I see you. And for the first time, she didn't look away. I shouldn't have trusted Kelran. But desperation has a way of dulling instincts. He was an old contact, a smuggler turned fuel broker, and we were low, critically low, on stabilizer fluid. I thought I could barter spare parts from our secondary drive array. Quick deal, in and out. He showed up at the edge of the NYX-47 sector, smiling too wide for a man with rusted teeth. We docked ships side by side, hulls kissing in vacuum. I made the trade, and for a moment, it seemed like things would hold. Then he saw her. Serana wasn't trying to be seen, she was just passing behind me, arms full of scrap wire. But the moment his eyes landed on her, I knew something shifted. That kind of look, calculated and cruel, it turned my stomach. Didn't know you traveled with rare cargo, Kelran said, voice oily. She's not cargo, I growled. She's crew. He laughed. Sure. Beautiful thing like that? Bet there's collectors who'd pay half a moon for one alive. I shoved him off my ramp and sealed the airlock. That night, I set the ship's alarm grid to full. Trip lasers, kinetic turrets, and an overcharged hull spark barrier. But it wasn't enough. They came during the second sleep cycle. Hit us with a power drain and a jamming field. No warning. By the time I reached the lower deck, she was gone. Just a smear of blood on the floor, and a scarf, green, torn, left behind. I screamed into subspace. Called in every favor I had. Begged, bribed, threatened. And finally, Kelran's name surfaced, tied to a black market courier route through Sector 9. I hit that jump blind. Because if he'd hurt her, I wasn't coming to negotiate. The Leviathan graveyard was where warships went to die. 1,000,000 tons of broken steel and forgotten battles, orbiting a dying neutron star in slow, silent decay. It wasn't on any charts anymore, too unstable, too haunted. Which made it perfect for us. I found Serana drifting in a sealed medical crate aboard Kelran's freighter, locked down like stolen art. When I opened it, she was curled up, pale and trembling, a small breathing mask pressed to her face. Her eyes fluttered open when I touched her hand. You came, she whispered. Always, I said. I didn't let her out of my sight after that. We jumped straight into the graveyard and buried ourselves in the wreckage of an old dreadnought. Half the system still hummed, ghost power from old reactors. Enough to survive. Enough to vanish. Days passed like falling ash. I patched up the systems while Serana rested, healing slowly in the quiet. Sometimes she hummed, soft melodies with no words. Sometimes she told me stories of her homeworld, of wind chimes made from stone, of rain that shimmered like glass, of exile. She didn't cry. Not once. But I saw it in her eyes, the weight she carried. One night, as the neutron star pulsed outside our window, I sat beside her in the flickering light. She leaned against me without asking. I still don't understand, she said. What you see in me. You're strong. You're brilliant. You care when no one taught you how. She smiled faintly. You're strange, human. I laughed, just once, and looked at her. Really looked. Then I kissed her, soft, careful, as if she might vanish. But she didn't. She kissed me back. And in that broken warship graveyard, the silence finally felt like peace. They found us just after the 6th orbit. Union bounty cruisers, sleek and sharp, crawling into the graveyard like spiders into a dying web. I saw the shimmer of their cloaking fields blink out, 3 ships, fast, full of guns. There was no warning. No hails. Just the familiar hum of a targeting lock painting our hull. Serana stood beside me, calm despite the panic clawing in my gut. She didn't ask if we were going to run. We both knew we couldn't. So I did the only thing I had left. I activated the emergency broadcast. Dumped every encrypted file I'd stored, Kelren's logs, the footage of her locked in that crate, the scans from a Union inspection, the stolen documents classifying her people as aesthetic anomalies unworthy of diplomatic status. And then her voice, soft and unfiltered, reading the stories she'd told me, of exile, of survival, of hope. The signal flooded the outer systems in under an hour. And something happened I never expected. They responded. Fringe captains, old veterans, scavengers, and settlers, voices human and alien alike, rose up in outrage. Protest ships began blocking trade lanes. Pirate networks broadcast Serana's face across the stars, framing her not as a fugitive, but as proof. Proof that the Union didn't protect life. It curated it. The bounty cruisers slowed. Then stopped. We watched them drift, uncertain, as a wave of public backlash crested behind us. The Union blinked. And for once, it was enough. They pulled back. Serana was granted asylum status. Then personhood. Then something more, an invitation to speak before the Fringe Assembly. That night, under a sky filled with auroras, she turned to me and said, "I'm still not beautiful like human women." I took her hand, kissed her knuckles. "No," I said. "You're more."